Hey everybody, today we're doing another topic video. This week we're talking about your favorite Pixar movies and why. I did Disney animated movies and I thought I would make Pixar just kind of a separate video. Before we get into that though, I will plug my website. As always, it is deepfocuslens.com. I am an artist, I do commission portraits, and I also sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission portrait or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Okay, here is the first one. The Incredibles is my favorite because it's both a beautifully executed action movie and a super uplifting comedy despite the dark turns in the story. It works because every character arc gets an amazing payoff. The gags still make me laugh, the music is bombastic, and the family relationships are realistic and relatable. Also, the film's legacy shines through this current wave of superhero-related art because it doesn't just settle for an average character study. It asks nuanced questions about our need for heroes in society and the hero's need for validation. Yeah, so I do think I have kind of mixed feelings about The Incredibles. It is one of my all-time favorites, just on an emotional level. There's something about it. There's something about the spectacle, just the very sleek, very kind of mod 1960s style to it that just gets me. And I just really, really love the characters, as you say, particularly the way they're drawn. It just really serves, their personality and the voice so perfectly. And yeah, I do agree. I mean, it's just full of zinger after zinger after zinger. The music is absolutely fantastic by the great Michael Giacchino. I think that was the first time I ever really heard Michael Giacchino's music at the time, and I was just really blown away by it because clearly, there was real composition and real merit going into this music, and it was so great to hear that 1960s big band quality. That said, the movie is not without its flaws, and it's been such a long time since I've seen it, and I have to admit, a lot of these movies I haven't seen in many, many years, unfortunately. Some of them I haven't seen since they came out. And so I'm not as well versed on a lot of the Pixar films. I actually really think that the heart of it is certainly the family dynamics, and I almost wish that that existed more in the film. I feel that it kind of gets lost a little bit along the way. And I guess when it comes to the movie, I think it could have been a masterpiece. I think it could have been maybe the greatest Pixar movie ever, but there are just certain things about it that make it fall short for me. It starts to lose a little bit of the tension when it really needs it, I think, and also it's just a little bit too long, or just tonally, I think it struggles a little bit towards the end of the film. And I also kind of struggled with the antagonist. It was Syndrome, I believe, and I just don't think he's quite worthy of this particular world. Certainly an interesting idea for a villain, but I don't know, it's just not quite working for me in the way that the rest of the film is working. But yeah, in terms of aesthetic, I really do think this is one of the best Pixar films, and just the action and the set pieces in it, I think, are some of the most grand and yeah, so some of the most ambitious of the time, certainly. Maybe even just today. I haven't seen a Pixar film in a long time, or the more modern ones, but yeah, I just remember the spectacle really standing out to me as special. Especially that dash chase sequence, I think, is absolutely phenomenal. That's one of the best sequences in all of Pixar. But yeah, that's definitely one that I would return to again. Up, because it completely surprised me with its deep exploration of overcoming the death of a loved one. Having gone through that exact pain several years ago, I couldn't believe that a Pixar film, of all things, could nail that level of emotion better than any R-rated film I've ever seen. The ending, when his house disappears into the clouds, is the perfect metaphor of finally just letting go of that pain after many years of torture. This is a film that I have maybe more mixed feelings on, and I do think that the metaphor and the image of that house and the balloons is a stunning image. It kind of reminds me of like a Miyazaki. It has that kind of wonder to it, like a Howl's Moving Castle quality. It's just a gorgeous image, and metaphorically, I think you've completely nailed it. There are elements of Up that I think are some of the best in Pixar. Again, I think when people talk about Up, their first thought is to go immediately to the opening of the film and how emotionally engaging it is. And I totally agree. I think that if that had just been a short film, it would be one of the great short films of all Pixar, for sure. And I think, yeah, emotionally it hits every note just perfectly. It has a real maturity. It understands certainly the silence of everything, but it captures the quaintness, the bitterness, the sweetness, and that deep vulnerability, and all knowing how to do it with perfect balance. And it does remind me of, like a Chaplin film or even like a Buster Keaton film, just the simplicity of everything. You talk about a movie like this being very emotionally engaging compared to like a rated R movie. And to me, that makes all the sense in the world. I think some of the most emotionally engaging things we've seen come from animation. And I think part of it is because it's so stark, because a lot of it is so simple. And when things are presented in a simple way, I think the emotion is more palpable. At least it is more accessible, I think, to all kinds of different people. And yet again, Michael Giacchino astounds with just an extraordinary score. This one reminds me almost of like Nina Rota Fellini collaborations. To put that opening sequence to music, I think is really a tall order, because how do you do it without being overly sentimental? It's so easy to do that, and he found the perfect balance. Because he found a way to bring in the cheekiness, the sweetness, the vulnerability, the bitterness, again, just like the opening sequence does. It has that same kind of taste to it. And the voice acting is fantastic, the animation is fantastic, but I have to say, I struggle with a lot of the movie. I love the opening, and I love, I think there's like a section maybe before the third act or going into the third act that I enjoyed. I thought was very kind of emotionally powerful and mature. And I enjoyed the end of the film, certainly. But the whole middle section for me felt really disjointed. It felt like a different movie. It's like I felt this emotional power that you're describing here. And, it is surprising for a Pixar movie. And I guess I wanted it to keep going in that direction. I wanted it to carry through a little bit more. But it felt kind of more like a generic kids movie in that middle section. Now, I haven't seen it since it came out, so I may feel very differently now. But this is one of those movies where I had really high expectations going into it, and they were surpassed when I watched that opening, and I was preparing for that opening. But the middle section just really left a lot to be desired for me, and ultimately, I struggled with the movie. And yeah, that's always kind of frustrated me, but I don't know. Maybe I'll revisit it at some point. WALL-E, while the whole film isn't a silent film, a good chunk of it is, and really shows how accessible that can be for anyone. I think it could be used as an important step to gain access to that world. On top of that, it's a gorgeous film that handles its message beautifully, unlike some recent Pixar like Soul. So I haven't seen many recent Pixar films, so I can't comment on that. I know what you're speaking about because there was some controversy there. But when it comes to WALL-E, yeah, that's one that when I saw it did remind me, I mentioned before Up, it kind of had like a Chaplin sense of quaintness, but there's real emotion there. And there's something about the simplicity of Chaplin that allows the emotion to kind of become, the centerpiece or the star of everything. It's like there's something very pure, kind of that love story. And, like Chaplin had maybe the greatest love story as well in City Lights. And this certainly reminds me of that. And yeah, I do think when it comes to Pixar, it probably was their most mature and their most ambitious, just in terms of creating kind of a different feeling. I think it's really ballsy to be as quiet as it is, to be as minimal when it comes to a lot of the characters and everything. And I think there's a sense of wonder here that reminds me more of movies in, like, I should say Disney movies from like the 1930s and 1940s. I said this before when I talked about Disney last week, but I talked about how the movies of the 1930s and the 40s when it came to Disney, I think are the most powerful. And even you could even go into like the 50s and the 60s just because just because it was less corporate. It was a lot less corporate back then. Even in the 90s when, arguably that was the golden age of Disney. There's something about that time, as magnificent as some of those films are, that do feel just a little bit too self-aware when it comes to the critical acclaim and just the marketing of everything, the corporate nature of it. And I just naturally respond to maybe the innocence of those earlier Disney films. And I don't know, I do think Pixar really capitalized on that feeling at certain points. Yeah, like not every film is perfect, but the ones that are really, really good, I think remind me of that. And WALL-E is one of them. Keeping that childlike quality intact, I think, can be quite difficult at a certain level. And Pixar really hit a golden age. And I think WALL-E was right in the middle of that. Toy Story, the animation is beautiful. Great characters. Talks about fitting in and trying to stay relevant. It's just a great, beautiful film with wonderful messages about new friendships being formed. A truly timeless classic that warms my heart. Yeah, and of course, it was the first Pixar film, and You know, it had a lot riding on it, I think, and I think it really kickstarted just a great phase in animation, a type of animation that's more sophisticated than something like DreamWorks will say. And yes, Toy Story, I think, is kind of the quintessential Pixar film. A film like that, or even like Finding Nemo, there's something very quintessential because it has such heart to it, yet it also has kind of a sense of wonder and spectacle and artistry to it. The characters of Toy Story are what make it so powerful. And yeah, certainly the heart of it is the friendship. For me, no other Pixar film quite captures what it means to be a child, and just the preciousness of childhood and that nostalgia, quite like Toy Story did. Other Pixar films tried, but there's something about Toy Story and the sentimentality of it that I find to be really, really moving. I will say, though, I've seen all three of the films. I've seen the first two, Lord knows how many times, because I was a kid, you know. And I saw Toy Story 3. I remember being affected by it, certainly. I remember thinking it was a little bit too sentimental. Maybe I should revisit it. Tell me what you think. People that have seen it recently. Just to me, I remember it was getting, you know, tons of critical praise, and there was something about it to me that just rang a little bit false, and, you know, maybe I'm just soulless, I don't know, but yeah, that's something I would like to hear about. Inside Out. Family films often teach lessons that are positive but somewhat cliche and banal. What I love about Inside Out is that while being incredibly funny and entertaining, it teaches truths about human emotions, development, memories, and relationships that are profound, and it teaches these lessons visually, which makes them not only more accessible, but more beautiful. And when we see that yellow and blue memory orb mixed with both happiness and sadness become the core memory for Riley, we feel the main lesson of the movie, that often the most meaningful moments in our lives are when friends and family meet us in our sadness. You make a really good point, and I do agree a lot with what you say here. I do like Inside Out. I remember when I saw it, I remember it deeply affected me emotionally. I have to say, though, it's one of those films that I don't think quite holds up on multiple viewings, though it's certainly a good movie for me. But there's just something about the style of it that makes me feel like, even, you know, like while I watch it, I'm like, I think we're past the golden age for Pixar in terms of just their most creative works. It's got really fantastic performances and just a real sense of heart and brightness to it. Absolutely. If there's one thing that I can say for it, it's I can feel the heart, the emotion that went into it, which is very, very important to me. But overall, there's just something about the idea of, you know, your emotions being inside of your head. An interesting concept, a tough one, I think, to pull off, especially for children. But there's something about that that almost feels like it is limiting when it comes to being able to create certain characters, and something almost limiting about it when it comes to the symbolism, when it comes to what it could represent in terms of metaphors. And there's something about that literal quality when it comes to presenting the lesson that, I don't know, is just not quite working for me. I guess I kind of prefer the lessons to be a little less on the surface, a little less on the nose, and also to have a little bit more imagination, creativity. There are some very creative sequences in the film, but I do think just overall, when it comes to aesthetic, when it comes to the look and the animation, it's not quite on the level of the older Pixar films. Certainly doesn't have that cinematic quality to it. The third act was a little bit chaotic for me, though it does always have that emotional center, and it always sticks through it. It's very consistent. And by the end of the film, I think everything comes together in a way that felt satisfying from what I remember. But yeah, I don't know. I think if you look at all the different Pixar films, especially the really great ones, and you watch Inside Out, there's just something about it where it's not quite landing in the same way. It doesn't quite have that same kind of energy and spark and nuance to it. But certainly an effective film. Don't get me wrong. I have a lot of sentimental favorites. Absolutely. That's my childhood too, is Pixar. But yeah, no, interesting topic video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Over here, you'll see my patrons who have been wonderful. Thank you guys so much for your support. If you are interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.